For my work placement, I went to View Creative in Ross-on-Sea. They're the biggest graphic design agency in North Wales. My placement wasn't too hard to organise because I'd known about View for a while because of one of my tutors. So when it came to choosing a work placement, they were the first company that I considered. I just sent them an email asking if a placement was possible and then got an email back for an interview. So I went in for the interview and spoke a bit to one of the designers who said that they'd be happy to have me for 2 days a week throughout February. So I ended up going in Monday and Tuesday every week. The room that I worked in when I was there was a square-shaped room, and there was about 9 people working in that room at any given time. But it was really relaxed, so it was really easy to get on with work. I think in total I worked on 4 projects over the course of the month. There was the DMM brief, which was to rebrand a company that specialises in creating climbing gear. So I made logos and a new branding style, which was a lot more modern than the one that they were using. I made posters, flyers and banners for a Summer Sounds festival, and I also worked on 2 booklets that View had made in the past that the clients just wanted updating. So most of the work I did was graphics based with a bit of illustration here and there. I think looking back on the experience, it hasn't really changed my idea on what a graphic designer does, but it has taught me that there's more to it than just designing something for a client. There's a lot more thought that goes into the small things, and there's a lot of back and forth with the client to make sure that they're happy with what they're getting. So they'd have meetings and they'd constantly be talking to each other about where they're up to and what they have so far. Being at View hasn't really changed what I think about my own practice, but it has changed my mindset and how I approach projects now. So before, when I was given a brief, I'd try hard to think about my final piece and what I wanted it to look like in the end, whereas now, after the placement, when I get a brief, the first thing I do is create worksheets and mood boards and do research, and then let my final piece develop from them. So for example, during my time at View, we had a brief for college which was to create something for the DNAD. I was doing the WWF brief. So before I went to View, the first thing I did was think, right, this is what I'm going to do. I wanted to do an animation, but 10 minutes after getting the brief, I'd already had like a solid idea of what I wanted my final piece to look like. Whereas after, now that I've done my placement, I sat down and I created worksheets, and the animation that I wanted to make has completely developed into something else. I think overall I learned a lot from being on the placement at View, and I think it's definitely worth it for anyone who's thinking of going on a placement. It really helps you to see what working in the industry is really like, and for me it really motivated me to crack on with my own work and helped me to develop some new skills and new ways of working. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is thinking about it.
For my work placement, I went to work for Cwmni, who are one of the biggest media companies in Wales. They produce work for S4C, the BBC, BBC4 and Channel 4. The placement was quite easy to organise because my tutor had contacts within the company, but after emailing back and forth a few times, I'd arranged to go to Cwmni for a tour of the building because they weren't sure whether they had a work placement available or not. However, once I sat down with the graphic designer at Cwmni to go through my portfolio, they then offered me the placement. My placement was for 2 days a week throughout February, and over the course of the placement I created titles for a children's TV show called Tinga Tinga. I created over 50 titles on my first day at Cwmni, and these titles are going to be used within the show itself, so that'll be on S4C, which is very exciting. I then began work on a promotional poster for an app. The app was created around a building called Plas Glynneweddw, which has been turned into a gallery, and they have a gadget called an iBeacon which links with this app to feed you information on various aspects of the work held at this building. I then went on to create an emergency contact poster for Cwmni. Although not the most exciting project to have been given, it was still something that may come up if I was a freelance designer, so I was happy to do it. Although I was very excited to work at Cwmni, the working environment wasn't very encouraging. I was sat at the end of a long table next to the graphic designer at Cwmni with 3 other people in the same room. The room I was working in was usually dead silent, and I hated breaking the silence to ask for advice or to say that I'd finished the work that I was doing. There was, however, a day where music was played all day, and it dramatically improved the working environment for me. There was no awkward silence to break, and I was happier and more willing to ask for advice and to say that I'd finished the work to get feedback and continue working. Whilst creating the posters for Plas Glynneweddw, the graphic designer there told me of a feature within Photoshop called layer comps, which allows you to create a poster design, you then add a layer comp, change the design completely, add another one, and then you can click on the previous layer comp you've created, and that layout will come back. So that was really handy for creating over 20 poster designs. It was a tool that I will continue to use. Looking back on my experience at Cwmni, I haven't really changed my opinion on what a graphic designer does. However, it's changed my opinion on the amount of time and depth of detail taken into consideration on a project, and the amount of back and forth there is with ideas and trying out various layouts and changing the smallest thing that can make the biggest difference. Cwmni has also taught me about the importance of bilingualising my work, especially because I live in Wales. Being able to have a work placement anywhere is a great opportunity. The organisation you work for is taking time out of their own day and time out of working on their own projects to allow students like myself to learn from them. Placements are a great way to get inside an organisation and see how it functions, the amount of time they put into their projects, the way they communicate with clients and resolve situations. It was a great learning experience, and I'd recommend it to anyone that wants to learn.